Hey students, this time for social studies, let's talk about the political philosophy leading to the U.S. Constitution. So who are the thinkers or philosophers that led to the U.S. Constitution? Well, there's three main people that they point to: Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. These three people wrote what's called social contract theory, and their three fundamental ideas were that people had natural rights, they talked about classical republicanism, and they talked about constitutionalism. Let's go into detail about what they wrote about. So what is social contract theory? Well, it's an act by which individuals agree to form a government. And according to social contract theory, governments are established by the people who combine to achieve some goal. Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau were social contract theorists. They hypothesized the existence of a state of nature prior to any government. So one of Hobbes' most famous works was titled Leviathan. He wrote that life is nasty, brutish, and short, and that the state of nature is war. For Hobbes, civil war was the ultimate terror, the definition of fear itself. He wanted to reform philosophy in order to reform the nation and thereby vanquish that fear. He said that for people, security was the most important. Hobbes said that civil peace and social unity are best achieved by the establishment of a commonwealth through a social contract. The ideal commonwealth is ruled by a sovereign power responsible for protecting the security of the commonwealth and granted absolute authority to ensure the common defense. One of Locke's most famous works was titled The Second Treaty of Government. Here he argued the prime government principle is liberty and places sovereignty in the hands of the people. He said people are equal and invested with natural rights in a state of nature in which they live free from outside rule. Natural law governs behavior, and each person has a license to execute that law against someone who wrongs them by infringing on their rights. This person puts himself in a state of war with you. Locke describes a state with separate judicial, legislative, and executive branch type governments, the legislative being the most important of the three, since it determines the laws that govern civil society. People have the right to dissolve their government if that government ceases to work solely in their best interests. The government has no sovereignty on its own. It exists to serve the people. So Locke's model consists of a civil state. It's built upon the natural rights common to people who need and welcome the executive power to protect their property and their liberty. Government exists for the people's benefit and can be replaced or overthrown if it ceases to function towards its primary goal. It has the consent of the governed. It enters into a social contract to protect the property and ensure liberty of its people. Rousseau wrote a work called Social Contract. In it, he says, man is born free, yet everywhere he's in chains. He talked about the will of all versus the general will. The general will, he said, can never err, as it always is aimed toward the public good. The will of all is an aggregate of the individual self-interest, where tyranny is possible in a government. And he said the purpose of a political community is to create a society where everyone chooses the laws that govern them. Men must be forced to be free, he said. By nature, all men are unequal. By making everyone a citizen in that society, it makes them equal under the law. Rousseau also said that people cannot survive on their own without the presence of a government. He said that man is truly a political animal, and to get what's most important, which would be security, liberty, and property, people must give their consent to be governed and enter into that social contract with the government. So these three writers and philosophers had a great deal of influence on how the U.S. Constitution was written, especially when it deals with the three branches of government and the social contract that the government has with its people. I'll be posting this video as well as some practice pages for you to work on. If you'd like more information, let me know and I'll post that. And as always, if you want to Zoom with me on this lesson, just click on the link in Schoology.